Hey, Abdullah.
Jamie, and hi everyone who's joining us right now. Pretty excited to talk about the new updates to the California climate disclosure laws, more commonly known as SB 253 and 261. And we're going to wait for a few minutes for people to trickle in.
It's nice to be back here again with you today, Abdullah.
Yeah, likewise. There's so much stuff that's dynamic with these laws, and obviously, the first reporting period is creating more confusions with each update. So, yeah, pretty excited to share what companies should know today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, while we wait for more attendees to trickle in, Jamie, I don't know if you've been keeping up with all the news, but AI in sustainability is kind of building a lot of momentum. Wondering if you've been catching up with those trends.
I mean, it's hard not to. It's everywhere, and what so many of the leaders in the space are talking about are the pros and cons around what AI is doing for the space. And
Mhm.
um, the general trend I'm hearing is how much it's accelerating sustainability and the ability to, you know, massively calculate power and digest data at a much faster speed, keeping up with changing regulations, providing data to make decisions faster. Um, However, on the flip side, AI also has really energy hungry data centers.
Yeah.
So then it creates an issue on that side. So it's always a balance of using the technology and the innovation, and then balancing it out on the operational side. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts towards it?
Yeah, no, that's so true. I think everyone's pretty excited about its potential, but like you mentioned, it's a very two-sided equation because personally, I would hate for it to turn into another Bitcoin thing where data centers are running off of coal-powered energy sources and yeah, the impact it could have to bringing more people into the conversation of tackling sustainability challenges and increasing the speed and throughout the whole sustainability workflow. It's pretty impactful, but yeah, like you said, it's going to come down to what is a balancing act and how can we make sure that it is one of the best things that we use to solve sustainability challenges instead of contributing to it.
Hmm. And I also think that we need to be careful about not allowing an over reliance. We still need human judgment. We still need human power to make sustainability decisions. I see it more as an accelerator and not a solution. It's part of the process. It's a high speed jumper cable to get us where we're going faster, but still we need to put our expert eye on the nuances of the data before we make decisions.
Yeah, exactly. I think we'll probably learn a lot more, especially with the AI providers now being forced to provide a little bit more transparency on how they're creating, because there's not only just one in the market
Mhm.
anymore. So yeah, likewise. Yeah, hoping to see the best of it and mitigate the worst of it.
Mhm.
Yeah, anything else that you've been keeping up with?
Well, what are your thoughts on Bill Gates' shift in climate messaging, and what does that signal to the market?
Yeah, it does tie into the data center and AI problem. I think it's very interesting, right? Like for the last 15, 20 years, he's had a pretty clear mandate on everyone adopting climate change, and everyone kind of agreed that academically, scientifically, environmentally, it all made sense and everything was on point. But um, I think he's now understanding what other businesses have to lose when they have to sacrifice, in their opinion, right? Like, I think if you do it smartly, then you don't have to sacrifice. But yeah, I think business interests may be swaying his opinion right now.
Well, I think he's so brilliant. He's always 10 steps ahead because, from somebody who deals a lot with customers and where they're at with their sustainability journey, a lot of people have moved away from sort of the unicorn of we're going to do it all approach to like what is compliance related, how do we avoid risk from a legal perspective, and he is going one step further and kind of getting away from sort of compliance and regulation and really looking at innovation and engineering. He's really looking at the how are we going to get there as opposed to where are we going to be. So sort of, I think what, he's focusing on sort of hard to abate sectors, that like it's really hard to say we're going to aim for net zero by 2050 when that's a pretty broad statement to make, when it's like, no, here's our plan for decarbonizing, and here's the the technologies that we're going to use to get there. And it's more about the how and the progress over the
Mhm.
production. And I think he's trying to be realistic in his language. And I think as a result of it, we're going to see lower and slower decarbonization trajectories, people making less blanket statements and more talking about how they're going to get there and what they're going to do in their supply chain and their operations.
Yeah, no, I think that's very interesting you mentioned that. I think, and again, I'm very biased in this conversation myself because I'm trying to tackle more of these challenges for decarbonization to scale. I think hard to abate sectors suck up a lot of the air in the room a lot of the times. And I agree, we don't have energy supply that is infinite from a source that's low carbon. Like we all know, that's the world we live in. We know cement, steel takes a lot of energy to build. But I also think that the easy to abate sectors should be scaling a lot faster.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that this doesn't push them back in any way, but yeah, moves them forward.
I think it's good news though for climate tech infrastructure. Um, I think it does leave room for more of this public-private partnership, and um, you know, tech is going to be needed, and it's not going away. I think it signals a strong advancement in support of ag tech, climate tech, anything tech to help us get there faster. So he's always just so far advanced. I don't think he by any means is devaluing the need to bring climate levels down. I think he's just saying, how are we going to get there? Um, it's
Yeah.
less storytelling and more engineering in a way.
Yeah. And being an engineer myself, I think my first investors and customers were very frankly reminding me that people don't really care about the how. So I think that is definitely a very scientific and engineering important question for us to solve as we build new technologies. But yeah, I think the storytelling around decarbonization, it has taken a back seat in the last 12 months. But hopefully, with everything else, if it goes up, it'll go down. And then if it's down, it'll go back up again. So yeah.
Mhm.
Anyways, I think we should have a few people who've joined in, and we can start it off. What do you think, Jamie?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay, perfect. Let me move over to different view. Okay. Yeah, so everyone joining right now, thanks for taking out the time. And we're hoping to provide you with some fresh updates on all the new things that have come out through workshops, through updates, through emails from the California Air Resource Board. And right now, I'll be honest with you, a lot of these updates often create more questions than provide answers. So please feel free to jump into the chat, and we'll try to answer as many specific questions to your own company's context, because that does really matter a lot within the framework of these laws. And like I said earlier, it's a pretty dynamic situation that if you want to continue following the updates, I recommend following the Arbor and Claris channels on LinkedIn. And as soon as we know, we will try to make sure we pass on that message to you as well. So getting started, let's start a quick round of intros. I am Abdullah Chaudhry. I'm the co-founder and chief impact officer of Arbor. We're a carbon management platform that specializes in anything supply chain related. So we tackle a lot of big scope 3 challenges using technology. And we're pretty excited that we see a lot of adoption now for really tough conversations in climate data. And we're helping companies enable them internally so that climate management and data governance is here to stay. And I'll pass it on to Jamie.
Thank you. So I'm the director of sustainability at Clearis, and I've been working in sustainability solutions for over 15 years now. I started my career working for Red Bull Energy Drink as their first director of sustainability and been serving clients ever since. The last 3 years, I've been leading the advisory arm of Clearest and also using that information to help our team of software developers develop tech that's going to enable solutions and also create partnerships like we have with Arbor. So I'm happy to be here today and share this information about California's legislation. Thank you.
Amazing. And yes, we're lucky to have you join us in this webinar, Jamie. I think, your experience in the industry provides a lot of context on how things can change in a rapidly shifting environment right now, especially regulatory. I'm sure in the US right now, state policies and federal policies have completely different aspects, and it will probably continue to change. So the way we have this webinar structure today is we'll provide you a high-level summary of the most recent updates, as well as then go into each regulation afterwards. So we'll go into SB 253, and I'll cover that because that is related to the greenhouse gas emissions calculation and reporting. And then we will feed into SB 261, which is your climate risk disclosure report, more commonly referred as TCFD or IFRS S2. Again, we'll end up using a lot of acronyms. So please, if you don't know what those acronyms are, please ask in the chat and we'll try to answer for you. Okay, great. So before I start this part, I always have to say we're not lawyers. And funnily enough, CARB in their own workshop mentioned this, that they're not lawyers and their recommendations are recommendations. So please, this information is only our opinion, and we hope that you'll be able to form your own opinion with this information. And if you have any questions about legal stuff, we recommend talking to your law firm or your lawyers in-house because there is a very dynamic situation. So first of all, in terms of major legal updates, there has been an injunction by the Ninth Circuit Court that has paused SB 261 temporarily. We have opinions of what we think will happen, but again, this is something that is, like I mentioned, pretty dynamic and can impact companies' timelines as well as who's included and not. And then, something to mention, because I've been getting a lot of this question, SB 253 is completely unaffected by this ruling. So this one is just for the first requirement, SB 261. And we expect that there be more updates coming in Q1 of next year, but we have a lot of companies trying to get ahead and plan ahead for what their 2026 would look like. So please, if you have any questions that are specific to your timelines on what's in scope, what's outside scope, please ask in chat or contact Jamie or I afterwards, and we're happy to provide more context around your situation. And then there has been a shift in the regulatory timelines as well for the submission parts. We'll cover that a little bit more in detail later on. And then going over some key definitions, there's been more clarifications according to CARB in their workshops. But like I said, these clarifications don't necessarily mean they're the letter of the law just yet. These are recommendations that still need to be approved by the board. But given the context that that may happen, we thought it would be nice for everyone attending this webinar to also know as well. First of all, it's the revenue threshold. In the legislation itself, it said that companies who make $1 billion or more in revenue in the fiscal year 2025 or 2024 will have to report for scope 1 and 2 in 2026 and then scope 3 in 2027. But in the most recent workshop, CARB mentioned that you can calculate your revenue threshold, whichever is the lesser of the 2 years, because this is something that some companies may be pondering. If you had a great year last year and you crossed the $1 billion revenue threshold and you may not cross it again, it is something that you could use to get an exemption for SB 253. But then again, right now, this is not part of the law. It's a recommendation to the board that still waits approval. So as of today, you still have to do SB 253. And then there has been a bit more context provided for doing business in California. Right? Previously, it was just your sales or your revenue. But then again, there wasn't a lot of context. The new proposal includes that the property payroll thresholds are excluded from that number of about 750K of sales-related revenue, but only focuses on all the sales and economic engagement. So pretty much taking out anything else other than your sales in state in California. Jamie, are you going to add something?
No, sorry. I thought you were on. No, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. And feel free to jump in, Jamie, if I
Thank
say
you.
anything. Yeah, so I think just summarizing again, the Scope 1 and 2 reporting date has been pushed by a few weeks, so nothing major. So it was June 30th. This is related to SB 253. And Scope 3 reporting remains in 2027. We don't know the exact date yet, but it's fairly logical to say it will be somewhere around that same timeline. And then this is something that I get a lot of questions on, so I would like to take a few minutes to explain this. Good faith reporting is an element that's mentioned over and over again in these workshops and the legislature itself. It provides a lot of discretion to companies currently, but it is still undefined. So the idea of this good faith clause is to allow companies to not be afraid of sharing the information of what they think is their other climate risk and opportunities, but essentially understand that this is a cycle that is here to stay and get really comfortable with collecting information and sharing that with CARB in a publicly available information. The other thing is also that the assurance is not mandatory for 2026 reporting right now. But again, on paper, it will be required 2027 onwards. And then, yeah, passing on to Jamie for some SB 261 updates.
Yeah, and there are bigger updates to 261. On November 18th, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals did issue an order granting an injunction against SB 261. That appeal is set to be argued on January 9th, which is after the January 1st deadline, which means that CARB cannot enforce the January 1st deadline. However, most experts anticipate that it's not going to change much other than the actual date of reporting. The thing about SB 261 is it's all about progress rather than perfection. It's a qualitative report. It's not even based on scopes 1, 2, and 3. You can submit 261 without having done a scopes 1, 2, and 3. It's really focused on gaps, limitation, and assumptions in your climate strategy. So when people say, well, could it get watered down? Could it get canceled? There's not much to water down. This is a really flexible, friendly piece of legislation, and it's really designed and encouraged just to show what kind of progress you're making. They did make 2 updates, which can be found on their website regarding their climate risk report checklist and their FAQs. So you can find that on their website, but the highlights of that are that the companies must post a link to the public docket, and that docket is open as of December 1st, and it will remain open until July 1st. And companies are required to post a link on your own website or your disclosure page. That link must take people also to CARB's public docket. And the docket, basically, this provides transparency to the public, to investors, to NGOs, competitors, anyone who can look at what's posted, add comments, raise concerns, or provide feedback. So again, this shift, we don't anticipate this staying, but it will be appealed and argued on the 9th of January. Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, no, thanks for the input on that, Jamie. I think everyone kind of agrees that I've talked to as well that this is only going to shift timelines and that your company's still going to take it. So while you're, thinking about your year ahead, this is something you should definitely plan for.
Yeah.
Okay, so that covers a high-level summary of everything that has changed in the most recent updates by CARB. But then again, these are things that may have more new updates as we go along. So please feel free to reach out to either one of us, and we'll be able to help you answer any questions that may come up after this webinar as well. So starting off with the second section of the webinar, I'll provide again a high-level overview of SB 253. And the reason behind that is that I want everyone to very I want everyone to be familiar with what to expect going forward, as this is a multi-year regulation. There's a lot of data involved, and a lot of the people that I'm talking to right now are thinking about changing their management structure. Obviously, that's something that's part of 261, but also understanding if they need to hire some people that they don't have right now with certain key skills, get specific tools like Arbor, and get experts around them so they have the best decision, like Claris, to make good decisions for the business. So starting off, the SB 253 it requires large companies to disclose their greenhouse gas footprint. This is a very quantitative exercise, and the first year's requirements are only asking for scope 1 and 2. Now, if you don't know what scope 1 and 2 are, these are usually emissions that you can see from your eyes or coming from purchased electricity source. Again, this is a very basic definition, but that's essentially what it applies. And scope 3 is everything upstream or downstream to your business. So upstream would be something like your suppliers, your equipment that you're purchasing, and then downstream would be the impacts of the products you're selling in the market. Could be like something like, for example, a toaster, could be something like clothing, could be fuel, but these are all downstream impact of after you've provided your product and service. So these scope 3 requirements will be coming into effect in 2027. But I think it serves you well if you think of them together as a requirement, because afterwards you'll have to continuously report on them. One important keynote, again, to remember, it only impacts companies who are doing $1 billion in annual revenue, but are also doing business in California. And we'll provide a little bit more context on what it means of doing business in California now that there are more context from CARB itself. But then also, please remember that this applies to both public and private companies, something that private companies are usually not exposed to. But given this regulations, this is something they'll also have to comply with. And if you have any more questions about scope 1, 2, and 3, please visit the Arbor website, where you can find a lot of resources on what it means. But then again, for the purpose of this webinar, we just want to communicate with you what we are seeing in the market. That includes some common challenges as well. So like I mentioned, most of the companies who are taking this exercise didn't really have a robust climate management program, and no faults to their own, but mainly because this wasn't a requirement of their business, and that covered so many areas of the business. So this is a very common challenge, because right now it's hard to communicate internally within the team when the language isn't well understood around what it means. So if this is the case for your company where there is no dedicated person, I would recommend thinking about what a robust climate management program would include, and then fill in those sustainability knowledge gaps, right? You don't have to become an environmental scientist overnight, but understand what terminologies like scope 1, 2, and 3 and TCFD reports mean, and what it could mean for your business as well. The thing that provides a lot of people anxiety, I think, in this space, including me, is the ticking of the clock, right? Jamie mentioned the timelines have been shifted a few times. Sometimes it's been made like it is right, it's going to be required fairly soon. Sometimes it's like, you're getting signals from market that it may not be so urgent. But then again, this good faith reporting cycle only exists for the first implementation phase. So I would say, please make sure you participate in some capacity where you can start thinking about your climate management program, as well as the knowledge gaps that you're starting to fill out. And one thing I always try to tell people is to always understand the intent behind these laws before you get really lost in the sauce, essentially. So the intent behind SB 253 is that the companies need to understand these risks themselves, and they need to price them out, and they need to understand that there's going to be risks and opportunities that climate change is creating, and it could be very variable based on your business's value chain or which industry you're part of. So understanding them is very critical to your bottom line. The other part, obviously, is radical transparency. This space has an issue with greenwashing that has stayed for a long time, way before these laws came in. So just taking that into account, the scrutiny in this environment is a lot in compared to other environments. So I would say the effort to have this law made, being passed is for companies to understand that this is something that's not a one-time requirement, but is going to continuously being asked for them to be able to back the data down the road as well. And obviously, the last thing is to act, not just disclose. So if you're essentially just collecting data to report at the end of the year, but that doesn't inform the leadership and different teams on what they could do next year, then it is not serving its purpose. So the idea is for you to collect all this data and then be able to publicly make available parts of it. But the idea is that it will allow the leadership and the management to take that data into their plans, their targets, their milestones for the following year, and be able to show progress within that data that they're delivering through SB 253. Now, going into timelines, like I mentioned earlier, the biggest update was the change of deadlines for Scope 1 and 2 disclosure, which was previously June 30th, 2026. Now it is August 10th, 2026. And everything else is pretty much on the same timeline. But as we've seen with other regulations, these timelines are subject to change, as well as the level of assurance or audit requirement can also increase over time. So I would recommend everyone to think about this as altogether as an area that you can start off with, but can build upon year over year. Okay, and then I think GHG protocol is starting to be a little bit of a familiar word for a lot of people. So again, please go on Arbor's website or scan this QR code, and you'll be able to read up a lot more on it than I can cover in one webinar. But like I said, for most companies, I can give you a high-level overview of where your emissions are coming from. So if you're a manufacturer, it's probably because you're using a lot of energy on site. It could be Scope 1 and 2. If you're a retailer and you're purchasing everything from those manufacturers, it would be something like Scope 3, purchased goods. So depending on the type of business you're involved, you can kind of already tell which areas are going to be harder to tackle and which ones are the harder portions or contributors to your emission profile. So start thinking about them as you collect this data. Okay, and then the compliance cycle is fairly simple, but also repeatable for other things as well. So anytime when you do these GHG emissions calculations, you start with really establishing what is in scope and what is out of scope. This is very important because at some point down the road, when your customers are going to audit these results, or your investors are going to ask for additional assurances, or the regulators are going to come in and check in and like cross-reference everything that you've said, they're going to want to know how you started on this process, how you qualified something as being in scope and out of scope. And then second part is identifying what your Scope 1, 2, and 3 classification of emissions looks like. And then this is the third part where most companies get a bit lost, is they try to collect activity data from everywhere. Once you have identified your emission sources, it should also help you be more specific in where you want to collect the data and be very focused in your approach on getting higher quality data for things that are the biggest contributors of your emission sources, because those are the areas that you'll have to continuously provide clarifications on what you're doing to mitigate those risks, and as well as like capitalize on opportunities. Once you have all this in one place, you can calculate emissions using the GHG protocol that provides the methodologies as well as the right emission factors to be used. If all of this is done right, the fifth step is usually fairly easy, but given it's not a requirement in 2026, I would still recommend companies to think of some sort of internal audit protocols that they can start implementing on these type of programs. So whenever third-party auditors do come into play, they're well and ready. And then the last step, obviously, is aggregate and publicly make the report available. Okay, so yeah, we've been getting a lot of questions. Like I said, a lot of these updates have created more questions for companies, and rightfully so. But here's some of the high-level ones. I already talked about the good faith effort. What does it mean for companies? I think you can continue expanding on that. But again, if you choose not to participate when the scrutiny is low, I think it is a disadvantage to your business. That's my personal opinion. So I would say try your best, as well as upskill your internal team to be able to tackle on the ongoing requirements of this program. And I think a lot of this is stuff that is mostly familiar to people. I think the one update I would like to give is there is more clarity on revenue threshold as well as fiscal years. So if you get a chance, please go on the CARB website and look through the FAQ sections that they have provided themselves. But please keep in mind that the document itself says that this is not legal opinion and this is just to provide further context to companies and is based on the questions that companies are asking. What that means is that the answers to those FAQs are still not part of the law, but that may be the case in 2026. And then lastly, we have been updating these resources for the community at large. We recognize there's a big knowledge gap to be able to serve both SB 253 and 261. So we have prepared a few resources that we have kept up to date that includes a checklist for everything that you need for SB 253, as well as a quick start guide that we've collaborated with Clearest on that includes both SB 253 and 261. If you're registered via email to this webinar, that will be sent to you after the webinar. And if you're watching on LinkedIn, somebody from our teams will reach out to share those resources with you as well. Again, final summary, SB 253, greenhouse gas emissions reported annually. I did not mention the fines before, but I think everyone knows that that's what they're using to implement it essentially, is that there could be a $500,000 fine per year for non-compliance with SB 253, as well as $50,000 per year fine for SB 261 non-compliance. The reporting standards are very well understood in the wider sustainability community. So if you get a chance, please understand what GHG Protocol corporate standard is, as well as the TCFD standard as well. Okay, and then now passing over to Jamie to tell us a little bit more about 261.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So basically, I think Abdullah talked a little bit about the differences, and just to reiterate one more time, 253 is more quantitative, focusing specifically on scopes 1, 2, and 3, whereas Senate Bill 261 focuses on the climate-related financial risk disclosures, which is more around how it comes alive inside your company, around the strategy, the governance, and the financial planning to avoid climate risk. Next slide. So we'll get into 261 for the rest of the presentation. Next slide. So this applies to all companies with over $500 million in revenue who are doing business in California. There's, I think somewhere in the presentation, we talk about 4,100 companies are required to report, and it covers public and private companies. It's different in the sense that you don't have to, it doesn't require greenhouse gas reporting. However, that information is very useful if you're going to build resilience in your company. You will need to report every 2 years and in alignment with TCFD, which we'll get into a little bit later. Next slide. So the penalties for non-compliance are $50,000 a year, and there are some exemptions. Insurance companies are exempt from this, not because they don't have climate risk, but because they have their own set of regulations. Government entities, California independent system operators, teleworking companies, and nonprofits are all exempt from 261. So there's a few issues with, which is why a lot of companies do hire outside experts to help them. And the main problems that people typically have, or companies have, are understanding the reporting requirements, especially because they change so often. There's a lot of issues with resources and data constraints, having your data not organized in a way that you can just download and upload a report. You have to put a database in place and figure out what you need, and ensuring report quality and accessibility. So going into and understanding the requirements, the TCFD framework is fairly straightforward and simple, but California does add state-specific nuances. Companies are still trying to interpret, like, what does sufficient disclosure look like, and what does material risk and climate risk, financial risk, governance structure, what does that look like? It's translating that into action isn't always so straightforward. So we're going to get into a little bit of what that looks like today. And some people also get confused about what voluntary reporting means. 261 really is about transparency. It's about disclosures that aren't just seen by regulators, but by the public. So it's designed to increase accountability where companies can't bury information anymore. It's really influencing public opinion. So that's what the point of this is. So it's that's why companies are often like, how much is too much? How much is not enough? And then how do you organize your data? Even companies that really want to comply struggle with understanding how to organize their data. And it's not just your internal operations, but it's also related to your entire value chain. And so getting that information from your supply chain and emissions can be very challenging. It's a heavy lift to organize all this data, which is why there's more and more software solutions to help organize this information. And this is where AI does come in often. And then ensuring accuracy and credibility. 261 does not yet mandate assurance, but it will. There's a slow trajectory to get there, which gives companies time to build up their 261 muscle and their practice and their practitioners and their teams. So right now, the balance is sort of finding the balance between speed and precision. Like, how do we report in a timely way without overreaching or even risking greenwashing? This isn't necessarily about what we want to do. It's about what we're doing and what we are going to do. So it's really taking away that promise and putting in that operational game plan. And a lot of companies are investing in internal controls and cross-functional review and just advisory support. These challenges require a coordination and clarity and a well-scoped plan. So let's go to the next slide and get into a little bit about the requirements themselves. So these aren't just a checkbox. It's not just a box to check and then you're done. It really marks a real shift in how companies are expected to measure, manage, and report on climate impact. 261 is really asking companies to raise the bar and putting climate reporting on par with your financial reporting in terms of detail and accountability. For most teams, this means getting comfortable with complex Scope 3 data, understanding frameworks like TCFD, and preparing facts that will now be publicly audited. So assurance does tighten in 2030, so we have 5 years to get really well oiled with this practice. Next slide. These are just the dates. Again, January 1st is when the first report was due, but with the stay, it will be argued January 9th. We anticipate most companies are going to just prepare because it's most likely going to be in effect after January 9th. Again, we aren't lawyers, but many companies are just proceeding forward with the January 1st deadline. And 261 will be reported every other year, heading towards the assurance of 2030. Next slide. So in the TCFD framework, there's really 4 pillars, and they go around governance, strategy. So your governance is your board, your management, who's overseeing which roles as it relates to your climate strategy, which stakeholders are present at the table. Your strategy looks at your risks and your opportunity on the bottom line. Like, what does your climate scenario analysis look like? And do you want to bring that in to make decisions about how you're going to plan forward? Your risk management, you're going to assess your transitional and your physical risks as it relates to climate. And then you're going to begin to put metrics and targets in place that give you a quantitative plan to help reduce. And then we'll go to the next slide and get into this a little bit. So, the first step is about assembling, this is the process you're going to go through for disclosure. You're going to assemble your team, and this is really your governance. Who's overseeing your climate risk? And this is about putting accountability at the leadership level, ensuring the board or the executive team are actively involved and engaged in overseeing your climate-related risks and opportunities. This is showing your investors and regulators clear lines of responsibility. Who owns the strategy? How often is it reviewed? How often do they meet? How are they making their decisions? Governance is a very foundational pillar. Without the governance, there's really no credibility behind the disclosures. It's really like the foundation of the house. And then we begin to put the strategy in place and start to assess your climate-related risks. This pillar connects your climate impacts directly to your business strategy. You start looking at transitional risks, which are regulations and market risks, not just the environment, but the revenue side, the operations, supply chain, and your long-term growth. And then you start to look at your physical risks, which are more like weather. How well can your business withstand different climate scenarios, flooding, the ship, the oceans, extreme weather conditions, or consumer shifts even. And this is not just internally, but it's your entire supply chain. So the strongest disclosures are going to show how climate factors are embedded into the overall planning and the capital allocation. Next slide. Then you get into managing the risks and identifying your metrics and targets. So how are you identifying and assessing and managing those risks? This is where scenario planning comes into play, and which climate risks are going to impact your enterprise and which are not, and what are you going to do about it if they happen? Now, at Clearis, we are a big fan of what is the next best step? You could scenario plan all day long and have binders and binders of reports on what if and what if happens. And there's a balance act to that. How many, really the idea is what is the next best step and what are you going to do if that happens? Look at what's really realistic so that you can put your metrics and targets in place and make it measurable. Link your goals to your accountability. And it should be linked to your scope 1, 2, and 3, your energy use and your climate-related financial impacts. Your targets will demonstrate your intent and your progress. We recommend going with science-based targets. You can set a net zero goal, but as we talked about with the Bill Gates mentality, it's really how are you going to get there and not what is the end goal. And this is all about transparency and tracking your performance over time. And next slide. And then finally, gathering the data and developing your narrative is a big of the heavy lift. It starts with developing the credible data from your emissions, your energy, your water, your waste, anything that's involving your climate risk. It's going to live in many places, from HR to finance, to your operations, procurement, your facilities. So the key is to break down these silos and align around one source of truth with your data. So the first year you start doing your reporting, it does require a bit of a data hygiene and getting things organized. And that's where a lot of advisors really have a lot of expertise. Engage with these early data owners and let them know what to expect and how much time to commit. Let them be considered key stakeholders. And also leverage software systems. Leverage systems like Arbor. You don't have to do all this manually. The systems are so much more efficient than they used to be. And then the final is to craft your narrative. The numbers don't tell the story alone. The narrative explains why it matters and how it connects your business strategy to your climate strategy so that they become one and the same. And here's where you can really talk about your material topics where climate and sustainability most affect your business stakeholders and create a value for them as well. This is where you can really talk about your company purpose and your resilience and how sustainability is driving your innovation, your efficiency, and building brand trust. A lot of people are using the TCF framework as the basis of their narrative alongside what their brand story looks like. And then you draft and review and you publish your report so that you can maintain traceability and provide that story to the external audience. Next slide. Think of this report not just as a compliance document, but a communication tool. It has to meet regulatory requirements, but it also should inspire stakeholder confidence in your company and allow them to get to see a different side of your company. And then each year, of course, you want to review the process and align with any lessons learned so that you can improve the process year over year. Next slide. So a little bit about our approach here. We help guide clients through this process, especially if they haven't done it first, because we're very familiar with the frameworks and how to use that as the backbone and then mirror that with your company's story. Bringing together cross-functional roles, the different departments, everybody's working in a silo right now, is one of the specialties of like, how do we encourage this collaboration to make an efficient process? And then we partner with smart tools like Arbor. I do encourage you to lean on support if you can and streamline your reporting wherever possible. And next slide. This is just a little bit about us. We not only focus on sustainability strategy and governance and carbon management, but we get into the weeds on sourcing and procurement and sustainability communications and all pure play sustainability programming. So thank you for the chance to give a Clearis plug here. And that's it from my slides.
No, I think Clearis covers so many important things that we as a technology company can. So we're very lucky to have you here, Jamie.
Yeah, it really goes hand in hand, the technology with the human power. And we've got a whole technology side on our team too. So we're so happy to partner with Arbor on this important topic.
Awesome. Yeah, I think we're good on time. Oh, perfect. I was like, we should just start taking questions. So Victory Aga says, regarding verification for these reports, are there specific requirements for who qualifies as a verifier? For example, accredited bodies under a national authority, such as the Canadian one or ANAB, or can any verification body perform the work? So I can take a first crack at it, Jamie, and feel free
Sure.
to add your answer to it as well. So CARB itself does not require that as of today, but you should probably work with somebody who's experienced. Like I mentioned earlier, the corporate GAG protocol for the SB 253 or the TCFD frameworks or the IFRS frameworks have been around for a while. These are not new standards, so there's a lot of volume of work that has been done in the space. So, if you are looking at evaluating auditors or assurance providers, just ask for their experience in this space, and if they have done those, then they are probably well suited to do as well. And I'll give a Clearis plug here that this is the kind of stuff Clearis can help you with too. So, Jamie, please go ahead.
Yeah, and also the assurance requirements for 261 won't be enforced until 2030. So we imagine there'll be a closer look at that process as that time deadline approaches from CARB.
Exactly. I think there's the data will be scrutinized first, and then the reports that the data includes in. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think they'll be digesting the public-facing reports for the next 4 to 5 years, and then as it gets closer, they'll put some assurance guidelines in place.
Exactly.
Are there other questions?
Let's see. I think, I have one. I don't know if we can make it available for everyone, but this one is a little bit around SB 253. I think it's more about asking for opinion, so I'll just say it out loud. It is, how would you recommend companies to proceed in reporting on SB 253 while the pause is still ongoing for SB 261? I think first, super quick, before I go into the question itself, is that SB 261 is a very temporary pause. So like Jamie mentioned in her presentation, that literally on January 9th, it could come back into effect and it could have a very quick turnaround timeline as well. But in terms of SB 253, it has not been stopped at all. And scope 1 and 2 emissions for the prior fiscal year are expected to be reported by August 10th. So that is a hard deadline that you should be working towards, with scope 3 to follow in 2027. And there is a small caveat to this as well, that even if you have filed for a letter for exemption, it just delays it by 1 year. And like I said, the good faith reporting part is a very temporary means to also have some sort of a very open relationship with the regulatory body. So I would recommend that you move forward with SB 253, and that is also still in effect. Jamie, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, I would just like to say that for people who are doubting whether 261 is going to be enforced or not, what CARB would have to do is take this to the Supreme Court. And I think based on the history of how California has voted in this direction, that is very unlikely, especially because it's such a qualitative report, really giving so much flexibility to the companies. I just can't imagine them taking this to the Supreme Court and looking for a watered down version. So that's why I think all experts are saying expect it to happen with a 9-day delay.
No, it's exactly what I've been hearing too, and from people who work at law firms. Again, this is not me interpreting their advice, but go talk to the law firms, and they'll probably tell you the same thing as what Jamie just said.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. I think one more question. I think this is very related to the fees for the SB 253. So it's pretty much two questions tied into one. What are the fees for reporting for both SB 253 and SB 261? How are these fees calculated? So I think very high level, it's calculated by dividing each program's expected annual administration and implementation cost by the number of in-scope entities. And it's a pretty funny number because CARB has literally said that they're not sure on how many companies are in scope because they can only look at a list of the ones that are domiciled in the US. So there could be more, but anyways, the fees that have been calculated is roughly US like $3,106 for SB 253, and then 1,403 for SB 261, and that's per entity. Yeah, I don't know if Jamie, there was anything to add?
No, that covers it.
Perfect. Okay, I think there's one last question that we could take. So it's a pretty generic open-ended question, but I think it'll be good to touch base on is what are the benefits of determining climate-related financial risk besides reporting to SB 261? And I think, Jamie, you mentioned a lot of good things, so it could be a good recap for people.
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, it's on the screen now too as well. What are the benefits of determining
Okay.
climate-related financial risk besides reporting to SB 261?
Yeah, it's just good business practice, and I think that's the transitional effect that's happening with these Senate bills is that it's not just a box to check. It's actually a new way of doing business, and these are real risks that could impact the bottom line. And so, building these in, like any other operational, physical, or transitional risk, is helping. It's just good business. It's a real factor that businesses need to consider, and being smart about what may or may not happen and how that might affect the bottom line and stakeholder and shareholder investment. So it's just a new order of business.
Yeah, I think I've found it very interesting, right? Because like obviously the GHG protocol and TCFD stuff in Europe has been going around for a lot more of a time frame where it has now become part of normal business. And funnily enough, somebody actually showed me that their procurement contract had this as a clause that you have to provide me climate related data by this date at an annual frequency because they are under purview of such reporting programs like SB 261. So if you want to win any new customers or larger contracts in Europe, it is already a benefit to your business to be using that information more proactively in sales, in procurement, in marketing, but obviously making sure that data is grounded in truth. And that's what these reports do, is you can point to the truth that's publicly available. And like Jamie said, build on the trust with your stakeholders that, include customers, and customers always right. So if they're asking for climate related data, you should provide it.
Yeah, and the reason I was distracted a moment ago is I was asking Michael, who's your facilitator, if I can ask a question, and I'm curious who is reporting. How many people or companies on the call right now are currently reporting or plan to report? Is there a way we can get a show of hands or?
Yeah, I think that would be pretty interesting. And yeah, you could be reporting for SB related stuff, or maybe perhaps you're already part of a company that is already have a climate management program that has obviously been reporting in different formats to other regulatory bodies.
And I guess we could just put comments in the chat if you are reporting, or just, put a thumbs up or. And while we're waiting for those to come in, do we have any other questions?
Okay, I think
Well,
yeah, we're probably coming to an end here. So we can probably wrap it up. And if there's any other questions that you're still adding to the chat right now, we can reach out to you privately and answer those for you, as well as if you want to schedule a demo of the Arbor platform and how you can use it for your data collection, management, and reporting for SB253, please feel free to use this QR code or my email. And I'll be happy to walk you through what that process looks like a bit more detail. And then I'll pass it on to Jamie as well.
the same. I just want to thank you, Abdullah, and the team at Arbor and our team at Clearis for all the hard work that went into both this and the last webinar. And yeah, I look forward to hearing from folks out there. And we're also available for a complimentary consult to let you know whether or not you need to report and how much time it's going to take. And yeah, thank you.
Perfect. And the way this thing is going, I'm sure, Jamie, me and you will be doing another update webinar after January 9th. So yeah, please follow.
That would be
Please
great.
follow Arbor and Clarist on LinkedIn, and we'll be sure to post and update you as soon as we hear anything that is relevant for companies.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure doing this webinar for you, and we look forward to having